Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out with me again. I'm excited for today's conversation. It's about MS and genetics and utilizing genetics testing to further research. Today's guest is Patrick Short, co founder and CEO of Sano Genetics, a platform that helps patients match with precision medicine research and learn more through personalized reports and other content, including patient stories. The platform is patient centric and private by design, and through data-driven matchmaking and home genomic testing has enabled precision medicine studies in common and rare diseases, including autoimmune and neurology, MS in particular, as an area of focus. Prior to founding Sano, Patrick was a researcher at the Wellcome Sanger Institute, where he worked on large-scale genomics projects, including deciphering developmental disorders, and the 100,000 Genomes Project focused on analyzing whole genome and exome sequencing data to better understand the genetic causes of rare disease. That is a mouthful. Welcome, Patrick. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. This is so interesting. I was approached by Sano to participate in this DNA project where I received a DNA test kit, spit into the vial. I could handle that, sent it in, and I received a ton of information about myself. I wanted to do it both, for curiosity's sake, find out more about me, and because your company uses the anonymized DNA from me, a person with MS, to use for research, which is so cool. Because I've always wanted to be a part of research, but I was afraid to do. In my mind, that equated to taking experimental drugs, which scares me. So this program really allowed me the opportunity to lend my MSy saliva for research, and it was super easy, and I just thought that was really cool. So I'm confident that you could do a better job in explaining the program and what each donor will learn with their own DNA tests and how that will help forward MS research.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to, and thanks so much for the really wonderful introduction. In a nutshell, when we started the company about 3 years ago, so I, as you mentioned, come from a research background. So do my co-founders, Will and Charlotte. But we all have also experienced the healthcare system up close and personal in different places, and have taken part in research studies. And one of the things that was really apparent to us is that taking part in research is really not very much fun for patients in general. You don't get much back. You often have no idea where you are in the project. I have sent blood and urine and other things into researchers, and I don't even know if they have ever arrived or been used for anything.
Crazy.
So, yeah, it is. And the industry, the medical research industry, really does rely on participants taking part and donating their time and MSc saliva, as you say, which I really like.
Yeah.
Um, and we felt like there was an opportunity to do it much better. And so we started from a couple of principles. The one of the primary ones being that the system is private by design and completely transparent, and participants are in control of their data. So we felt like at the time, about 3 years ago, for almost 3.5 years ago, that there was an explosion in direct to consumer genetic testing. So ancestry testing kits and number of things you can buy. And one of the big issues we saw with the industry in general is that it really wasn't clear to people that that data was actually being sold on the other side to power research. And we actually
Right.
felt like if you sat down, and we did a lot of this primary research early on, if you sat down and asked participants, would they like their data to be shared with researchers? Most people actually say yes. They just want to be in
Yeah,
control of that, understand who it's being shared with.
exactly. Happy to help forward research, but I'd like to know that that's going to be done with my stuff, my MS, saliva MS.
That's
I
right,
mean, my
exactly.
MSc saliva.
And really starting from that principle, a lot of the rest of the company sort of unfolds from there. So if we give people opportunities to take part in research, we give them the tools to have access to their own data, reports that are useful to them, and ways to take part. Then of course the researchers are on the other side, and this is what's most important to the researchers is that they have access to the data and the participants that they need to make their new medicines, whether they're precision or otherwise, a success. And actually, this is really important to researchers as well. They don't want to have the reputation of it as an industry of the treating people as guinea pigs, as is
Right,
often
right.
said. And so I think there's a really alignment on both sides. And what we're trying to do as a company is enable that through the online platform that we've built. as well as the at-home testing. And I think you explained it really well, that there's a lot of different flavors of research. On the one spectrum, there's taking part in a clinical trial, which is not something that everybody wants or needs to do. For people who it is relevant, it can be really, it can be life changing in some cases. And then there's all the way on the other end of the spectrum, something as simple as filling out a survey or spitting in a
Hmm.
tube, which takes about 5 minutes.
Yep.
And MS is one of the small handful of areas where we've been focusing, and I'm happy to talk about why MS in particular. And I'm not an MS specialist. We do have scientific advisors and patient advocates that we work with who are. I am more of a genetics specialist and a generalist, but I've learned a lot about the genetics of MS through the process of working with others on our teams and the research that we've helped to power.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to hear more about the why MS. I mean, I just think everybody should, but thank you for doing it. But I think first, let's start talking about what I think most people would have a question about first, which would be privacy. Like, how do we know that when I send you my MSE saliva, that that is who that's shared with, and that it's all kept private?
Yeah, so this is one of the first things we built from the product and platform perspective. Is every person who signs up and decides to take part in one of our research studies, they have full access to all their data, and they have actually a dashboard that shows the research that you've taken part in. You have a toggle where you can control whether you want it to be default private, so that any new researcher has to ask you whether they can have permission to access it, or whether you'd like to be default sharing, where you want your still anonymized data, so it's never going to have your name and email and those sorts of things included as part of the research package. So really, it's shifting the control a little bit from most of the industry, which is default.
Yeah.
You don't know default. You don't know what's happening, to default. You're in control and know what's happening.
Right.
That's our
Right.
approach to it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, someone decides they'd like to be, part of this. They want to sign up for the DNA testing and learn a ton about their own DNA profile. I hope I'm using that term right. DNA
You're exactly
profile.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and provide their DNA for use in this case, MS research. How do they go about doing that? Like, what's the first step?
So from a purely kind of tactical perspective, they can visit our website at Sano Genetics, SANO genetics.com/MS. And we have a page that includes not just information about the genetic testing, but also curated resource like podcasts and stories from other participants that you mentioned before. So that's kind of the online real estate, and really who it's for. We're a 3-year-old company. We're an early stage company, so we're still very much in the testing and learning phases, and precision medicine is a new area. So what we're really interested in at this point are people who can help us to give feedback and improve the system, and participate in research at the same time. So as a little bit of a genetics primer in MS, it was actually surprised me a lot when we started to work in the area, that if you talk to patients, you'll not always, but often hear people say, "My neurologist told me that MS is not genetic." And
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that or have
Oh, yeah.
heard others.
Repeatedly.
And it's somewhat complicated, because people often mix up, is it inherited? Did I get it from one of my parents directly with genetic?
Hmm.
And there's actually a lot of diseases that don't have clear inheritance, as in, if your mother had it, you'll have it. If your father had
Hmm.
it, you'll have it. If you have it, your children will have it. But there's nonetheless a genetic component. So we know that identical twins, brothers, sisters, have a much higher chance of having MS if another person in their family does. And there are examples of very large families where almost everyone has MS. But in general, it's complex. So genetics is involved, and we know that it's dysregulating the immune system. There's a lot, there's a ton of different genes that are involved in the immune system, but the picture is complex. So rather than a single gene where you can say, you will or won't have it based on this gene, it's actually more like a constellation of very small effect genes that put you somewhere on a risk curve, from low risk to high risk, depending on how many of these pebbles you end up with in your jar, so to speak.
Right. That's so interesting because I don't know, it was maybe more no, it definitely was intuitive because I'm not sciencey at all. My degree was in English for a very specific reason, to avoid math and science. I shouldn't admit that, but that's my truth. But I always, in my own mind, I thought, I think the cause of MS is not going to be found to be one thing. I felt like it's going to be, I always envisioned it like one of those locks where different things have to fall in place for it to lock. And I thought genetics, um, and probably environmental factors. And then I thought probably nutrition, and that might fall under environmental factors as well. But those just seem to make sense to me. And what you're saying kind of lends credence to that,
I
right?
think you're absolutely right. I think it's a wonderful metaphor. And when you look at any disease, if we step back from MS, there's kind of two. And when we write our reports, we try to break down at the beginning of the report these two axes, which is how genetic is it? Is it 100% whether you have it or not is down to genetics? And then also what are the other factors that are involved? And so that's a whole component of heritability. How genetic is it? What other environmental factors like diet or behaviors might involve. And the second
Mhm.
piece is then how simple or complex is the genetics. So if
Mhm.
we work through that kind of 4x4 square, if it's simple and it's all genetics, then that generally puts you in the realm of some very severe and often rare disorders, which is what I spent a lot of my PhD on. So in this case, if you have the gene variant, you almost certainly have the condition, and it doesn't
Mhm.
matter what else you do. There's no environment
Right.
involved.
Mhm.
It can also be simple genetics, but genetics plays a very small role. So one example, there's not many great examples here, but maybe eye color, for example, is genetics is not 100% of the picture. It's a
Mhm.
large part of it, but it's not. We still actually can't perfectly predict based on your
Mm.
genetics what is your eye color going to be. It's relatively simple. There's
Mhm.
probably not thousands of genes, but there's a handful. And then in the complex category, it can be complex where there are hundreds or thousands of genes and genetics is everything. But
Mhm.
there's MS, which is almost very likely in the category of complex, lots of genetics involved, but there's also a very big component which has to do with all those other aspects that you've mentioned. And a lot of the other autoimmune conditions like inflammatory bowel disease or lupus
Mhm.
also fall in that category of complex genetics, but there's other things involved. So there's some kind of threshold effect going on where you need multiple of these things to line up in one way or the other. And that's a lot of the work that we're interested in helping to power with this genetics research that we enable, is to try to understand a little bit more about what's happening and why.
Wow, super interesting. You mentioned precision medicine a couple of times. Would you mind giving a little definition of that?
Definitely. I tend to use the terms personalized medicine and precision medicine pretty interchangeably. A lot of scientists and government people kind of fight about what the appropriate word is. I personally really like personalized medicine because it's super clear.
Mhm.
Some people will say that personalized medicine is the destination where we all get a personalized medicine that's tailored for us, and maybe precision medicine somewhere in between of we've gone from treating MS as one group to
Masses too. Yeah, got
exactly
it.
to somewhere in
Okay.
between. And genetics is often involved, but it doesn't have to be. To be a precision medicine, it's a little bit of a nebulous category, but really what it means is going from one size fits all to let's actually use some
Fit
data
it.
to understand why
Got it.
this group deserves a slightly different treatment than the other group. And I
Yeah.
mean treatment in the broadest sense of not necessarily a drug.
Yeah. Oh, love it. Okay. Thank you for that. I was really impressed. I know I've told you this, but with just like how seamless and painless this process was. I was kept incredibly well informed on the entire process. I just want to kind of go over that process for everyone's sake that's considering this. So I received an email welcoming me to the program and telling me to, expect the kit in the mail soon. So I signed up. That was the first thing. Signed up, got this email, you will, expect a kit in the mail soon. And then when I received it, it had very clear directions on how to provide the DNA sample bit. That's the MSC saliva I refer to, and how to get it, back to the company, back to you all. So once I sent that back, I received another email telling me that it had been received. So to your point, often I have done things like this before, and I don't hear that they've received it or anything. So that was good. Okay, got to where it's going. And it said I'd be hearing again as it progressed through the